The memory hit like shrapnel through armor. 12 years had passed, but Lieutenant Lyra Solvane still felt the heat. Not the comfortable warmth of her chambers in the Sky Throne. Not the soft glow of crystalline trees humming outside her window. No, this was the heat of burning fuel and scorched metal. The heat that meant you had seconds, not minutes. The heat that separated the living from the dead. She stood at the observation deck of her orbital palace, one hand pressed against the transparent aluminum viewport, the other touching the scar at her left temple. The mark was small, barely visible beneath the intricate braiding of her midnight hair, but her fingers found it instinctively, the way a soldier's hand finds an old wound when the weather changes. Below her, Mars rotated in its eternal dance-red dust in ancient valleys stretching across a world that had once seemed impossibly far from Earth. But Lyra wasn't looking at Mars. Her violet eyes, that distinctive Etherian trait that marked her as something more than human, were fixed on the holographic display floating in the air before her. A dossier, a face, a name. Dr. Cade Brennan, age 38, current location Terra Nova settlement, Nevada Territory, Earth. 47 searches, 47 false leads. 47 times she'd thought she'd found him, only to discover another Cade Brennan who'd never set foot on a battlefield, who'd never pulled a dying lieutenant from burning wreckage, who'd never made a promise in the dark while the world exploded around them. But this time she was certain. The hologram rotated slowly, showing a man with weathered features and steady hands. Hands that had once held her together when she was bleeding out at 18 years old. Hands that had worked with military precision while speaking with remarkable calm. Hands that had promised her she wouldn't die alone. She had kept count. Not of the days since Obsidian Front. That number was too large, too unwieldy. Instead, she counted the promises. The ones she'd made to herself in that transport wreckage, while Sergeant Cade Brennan worked to keep her alive. Promise 1, survive. Become the leader your people deserve. Promise 2, find him. Thank him. Make sure he knows his promise mattered. Promise 3, never forget what it feels like to be the person who needs saving. Never become the kind of leader who forgets. She'd kept the first promise. The plague had seen to that, killing 46 members of her family in 3 weeks and elevating a junior military lieutenant to crown princess. She'd become Queen Lyra Thornhaven at 19, the youngest monarch in Etherian history, thrust into power by catastrophe rather than lineage. She'd struggled with the third promise. Being queen meant performing constantly, calculating every word, every gesture, every smile. The court didn't want a woman who'd nearly died in a transport crash. They wanted a symbol, an icon, someone who made ruling look effortless. But the second promise, that one had consumed her for 12 years. The hologram flickered, new data streaming in from her intelligence network, confirmation codes, verification stamps, biometric matches. This was him. She closed her eyes and let herself remember. The transport had been designated Raven 7. Lieutenant Lyra Solvane, barely 18 and fresh from the Etherian Royal Academy, sat in the troop compartment with 37 other soldiers. A mixed unit, Etherian and human, fighting together against the separatist forces that wanted to fracture the alliance. She joined the military to prove something, to herself, to her family. As the 47th in line for the throne, she'd been expendable enough to be allowed to serve, distant enough from the crown that her death would be mourned, but not catastrophic. The plasma strike hit without warning. The transport crashed, rolled, came apart like a toy crushed underfoot. When the world stopped moving, Lyra found herself pinned beneath debris, 2 dead soldiers draped across her legs, and a growing pool of her own blood spreading across the deck plates. The artillery bombardment started, separatist forces hammering the crash site with everything they had. The sound was beyond deafening. It was fundamental, each explosion rewriting what it meant to exist. Then she heard the voice. "Stay with me, Lieutenant. You're not dying today." She couldn't see him clearly through the smoke, just a shape moving with purpose through the wreckage, human from the silhouette, somehow calm despite the hell raining down. "I'm Sergeant Brennan, Cade, and you're going to be fine." Hands on her, assessing, moving with practiced efficiency. She felt pressure, bandages, something being injected. The pain became manageable. distant. Can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can. She squeezed, weakly. Good. I need you to stay conscious. Can you do that? Another explosion. He covered her body with his own, taking the shrapnel, protecting her. Hey, he said, you like stories? I'm from Arizona, place called Sedona. Red rocks bigger than starships. Desert so beautiful it makes you believe in something. He kept talking. While he worked on her wounds, while the bombardment continued, he talked. About home, about terrible military rations, about becoming a medic. You don't give up, he told her. That's the only rule that matters. She held his hand through the bombardment, gripped it like an anchor. The evacuation shuttle came eventually, hours later. Medical personnel loaded casualties. They reached for Lyra, started to separate her from the sergeant. She gripped his hand tighter, wouldn't let go. Hey, he said softly, you're going to be okay, but I need you to do something for me. Survive this. Become the leader your people deserve. That's an order from a sergeant to a lieutenant. She squeezed his hand, once. Affirmative. Good, now let go, let them help you. She released his hand. They lifted her onto the stretcher. As they carried her toward the shuttle, she looked back, saw him standing in the ruins, already turning toward another casualty, doing his job, keeping promises. The shuttle doors closed. She lost consciousness. 3 weeks later, the plague struck. 46 dead, and her suddenly second in line for the throne. By the time she could ask about the human sergeant who'd saved her life, Cade Brennan had mustered out, disappeared, vanished into the vastness of human space. She'd looked anyway. For 12 years she'd looked, and now finally she'd found him. Terra Nova settlement sprawled across the Nevada desert like civilization making a cautious bet against the wilderness. 3,000 souls, most of them colonists, who'd taken government incentive packages to settle Earth's frontier territories. Dr. Cade Brennan's workshop sat on the main street, a converted storage building between Mrs. Calloway's agricultural supply store and the communal dining hall. The sign read, Brennan Technical Services, in faded letters. Inside, organized chaos. Workbenches covered in equipment awaiting repair. Agricultural androids, atmospheric processors, medical scanners, communication arrays. If it was broken, Terra Nova brought it to Cade. At the moment, he was elbow deep in Mrs. Calloway's agricultural android, trying to convince its vocal processor that mooing was not an appropriate response to every command. Run diagnostic check, Cade said. Moo, Herbert responded. Cade sighed, pulled his head out of the android's chest cavity, wiped grease on his already ruined shirt. You're not a cow, you're an agricultural assistant. There's a difference. Moose, he'd been at this for 3 hours, had 2 more repair jobs scheduled. Mrs. Henderson's atmospheric processor making concerning noises. The settlement's water purification system operating at 60% efficiency, making ominous grinding sounds that suggested catastrophic failure was a question of when, not if. This was his life now, fixing things, keeping Terra Nova's infrastructure operational. Quiet work, uncomplicated. Nothing like the military, nothing like holding soldiers together while they bled out. He'd left all that behind 12 years ago. The shadow fell across his workbench just after noon. Cade looked up. The figure standing in his doorway wore armor that seemed to drink the light, not reflect it, not absorb it, but consume it. The armor flowed in curves and geometric impossibilities, more art than equipment. Dr. Cade Brennan. The voice emerged with unnecessary reverb. Cade set down his tools, slowly, carefully. Just Cade these days. Haven't used the doctor title since I left the service. And I don't service fancy tech like that armor. The courier reached into a compartment that absolutely had not been visible moments before, produced a crystal tablet pulsing with inner light displaying a seal Cade recognized. The Sky Throne, the Etherean royal family, the Queen. You are summoned by royal decree to appear before Queen Lyra Thornhaven, Defender of the Outer Reaches, Keeper of... Does she have a lot of titles? Cade interrupted. Because I've got 3 more repairs scheduled today, and Mrs. Calloway's android thinks it's a cow. The helmet turned toward him. Her Majesty's titles number 47 in formal recitation. I've been merciful. Appreciated. Cade took the crystal tablet. The text was written in standard and high Ethereum script flowing like liquid silver. Beautiful. Utterly unhelpful. The summons gave no reason, just coordinates for the Sky Throne in Mars orbit and a deadline. 3 days. What does a queen want with a washed-up medic on a backwater colony? Her Majesty's business is her own. A transport will arrive tomorrow at dawn. Be ready. And if I don't feel like being ready, the courier's hand moved to their belt. For a moment, Cade wondered if refusing a royal summons came with vaporization. Then the courier pulled out a data chip and placed it on the workbench. Her Majesty anticipated you might require persuasion. This contains 75,000 credits transferred to your account the moment you board the transport. Compensation for your time. Cade stared at the chip. 75,000 credits would fix everything. The water purification system, the medical scanner, the climate control. It would upgrade half the settlement's infrastructure. It was either very generous or very desperate. That's a lot of money for a house call. Her Majesty is rarely desperate. The courier turned to leave, paused. I'm instructed to inform you that refusal would be disappointing. Disappointing like she'll be wad or disappointing like orbital bombardment. Her Majesty does not bomb people who disappoint her. Usually, the courier left their armor bending light impossibly. Cade stood in his quiet workshop, surrounded by half-repaired equipment. Through the window, he could see Terra Nova's modest skyline, solar collectors glinting. The dried-up fountain nobody had bothered fixing in 5 years. He'd built a life here. Simple, uncomplicated. No command chains, no combat zones, no holding frightened soldiers while the world exploded. The crystal tablet pulsed gently, waiting for acknowledgement. Behind him, Herbert moved again. Cade picked up the tablet, pressed his thumb to the acceptance seal. The crystal flared bright, confirming his attendance. Whatever a queen wanted with him, it probably wasn't going to be boring. He had 3 days to finish repairs, pack a bag, and figure out what you wore to meet royalty. Herbert moved again. Cade sighed and got back to work. The transport arrived at dawn exactly as promised. Cade stood at Terra Nova's landing pad with his single duffel bag, watching the craft settle onto the ground with no regard for physics. Parts seemed to exist at angles that shouldn't fit together. The hull shimmered with that peculiar Ethereum quality, like it was deciding whether to be solid. Mrs. Calloway came to see him off. You come back safe, and tell that queen if she tries to keep you, we need you here. Herbert's still mooing. I'll let Her Majesty know agricultural android malfunctions take priority. A ramp extended. Cade climbed aboard. The interior made his inner ear file complaints immediately. Up and down were having philosophical disagreements. Walls curved in ways that suggested Euclidean geometry was merely suggestion. Lighting came from everywhere and nowhere. First time on an Ethereum vessel, the pilot was human, female. She sat in what might have been a chair, or might have been sculpture impersonating furniture. She had the relaxed posture of someone who'd made this trip 1,000 times. Is it that obvious? Cade asked. You're green and we haven't even left Atmo. She gestured to a seat. Sit anywhere, the ship will adjust to you, probably. Probably. Ethereum tech has opinions. Sometimes it decides you'd be more comfortable somewhere else and rearranges itself. Try not to panic if your seat migrates to a different deck. Cade sat carefully. The seat immediately molded around him, adjusting with disturbing precision. I'm Reese Valen, Captain. I run supplies and personnel between Earth and Sky Throne. You military was 12 years ago. Medical Corps. Thought so. You've got that look. The one that says you've seen things you'd rather forget. That obvious too. Takes one to know one. I flew rescue missions during the separatist conflicts, Obsidian Front among others. She said it casually, but Cade heard the weight. The thing that connected soldiers across time and distance. The understanding that some experiences change you permanently. The transport lifted off with barely a whisper. Terra Nova shrank to a handful of structures, then disappeared as they punched through clouds. The journey took 6 hours. Cade spent them alternately fascinated and nauseated. The viewport showed space in impossible ways, colors that shouldn't exist, stars close enough to touch. At one point, a nebula appeared to wave at them. Is that normal? Cade asked. Define normal. Ethereum drives don't move through space so much as convince space to rearrange itself. Sometimes space gets confused. The Sky Throne announced itself before they could see details. Then it appeared and Cade understood why they called it that. Impossible. That was the only word. The palace floated in high orbit above Mars, massive beyond comprehension, built from materials that seemed to shift like liquid crystal. Towers spiraled upward and downward simultaneously. Gardens bloomed in open courtyards exposed to vacuum. Bridges connected sections that seemed miles apart, yet were somehow adjacent. The entire structure rotated slowly, catching sunlight and throwing it back in prismatic patterns. Yeah, Rice said. Everyone stares the first time. I've been here 50 times. Still get lost. Palace rearranges based on the Queen's needs and moods. Yesterday, the throne room was north. Today, it's probably vertical. They docked at a platform that definitely hadn't been there moments before. Through the viewport, Cade could see other ships. A Therion craft that bent light. Human vessels that looked primitive by comparison. Stranger things. Ships that might have been grown rather than built. Welcome to the Sky Throne, Race said. Try not to get eaten by the architecture. A steward met them at the airlock. Human male wearing robes that shifted color with each movement. He introduced himself as Garrett and spoke with weary patience. Stay close, Garrett said. The palace likes to test new visitors. Last week it decided the dining hall should be upside down for 3 hours. Don't ask me why. They walked through corridors where gravity was polite suggestion rather than law. Cade watched water flow upward in crystalline streams. Gardens grew from walls and ceilings, flowers blooming in colors that hurt to look at directly. They turned a corner and suddenly stood in a forest. Not a garden, an actual forest with trees that stretched impossibly high and roots disappearing into mist below. The path wound between trunks that hummed with internal light. The Queen grew these herself, Garrett said. They sing when she's happy. Right now they're humming, which means she's focused. You'll know if she gets angry. Do I want to know what they do when she's angry? They play discord jazz. It's unsettling. The forest opened into a vast chamber where the floor was transparent, crystal showing Mars below. The throne sat at center, carved from frozen starlight. Standing before it, speaking with advisors whose pointed ears marked them as Etherian, was the Queen. Cade's first thought, Holovids didn't do her justice. Queen Lyra Thornhaven wore formal regalia woven from shadows and silver raven hair, cascading in an intricate braid, threaded with light-catching gems. Her skin was pale as moonlight. Her ears rose in distinctive, elegant points. She moved with absolute certainty, and every person oriented toward her like planets around a sun. His second thought, he'd never seen her before in his life. 12 years changed people, but this woman was queen. Monarch. Authority incarnate. Nothing suggested the terrified 18-year-old lieutenant he'd pulled from burning wreckage. The advisors dispersed as Garrett led Cade forward. The Queen turned and her violet eyes fixed on him with intensity that made him want to check if he'd forgotten something important. Your Majesty, Garrett bowed with practiced precision. Cade Brennan is summoned. Cade managed a bow that probably looked ridiculous compared to Garrett's. The Queen studied him for a long moment. He had the uncomfortable sensation of being catalogued, assessed, possibly found wanting. Then she smiled, and it transformed her entire face from regal to something warmer, almost playful. Cade Brennan, she said, her voice carrying that melodic quality all Etherian voices had. Tell me, do you remember pulling anyone from burning wreckage at Obsidian Front 12 years ago? The question hit like a physical blow. Obsidian Front, the siege that became massacre. The day he'd pulled dozens from crash transports while the sky rained fire. I remember a lot of burning wreckage, Your Majesty. That battle was extensive. She stepped closer, and he noticed the scar along her left temple, barely visible beneath her hair, small, precise. The kind of scar a medic leaves when trying to save someone with battlefield equipment in no time. Do you remember holding someone's hand in the dark? She asked softly, promising they wouldn't die alone. And suddenly, impossibly, he did. A face pale with blood loss, violet eyes struggling to focus, elegant ears half buried in ash. A young lieutenant who'd kept apologizing for bleeding on him while he'd worked to stop the hemorrhaging, who'd gripped his hand through bombardment because she was 18 and terrified. He'd stayed with her because moving her would have killed her. He'd talked to keep her conscious, told stupid stories, made terrible jokes, anything to keep her fighting. You, Cade said, his voice hoarse, you were the lieutenant, but they told me the hospital ship was destroyed. I know what you thought. Lyra's smile turned sad. I wasn't on that ship. I was evacuated earlier. By the time I recovered enough to ask about the human medic who saved my life, you'd already mustered out. You covered your tracks very well. I didn't think anyone would come looking. I looked for 12 years. Do you have any idea how many Cade Brennans exist in human space? I imagine several. 47. I found 47 before I found you. That must have been annoying. The first three were particularly disappointing. One was 80 years old. One was in prison for smuggling. And one insisted on showing me his collection of vintage Earth music. Her eyes glinted. I heard something called polka. It was traumatic. Despite everything, Cade laughed. Genuine and ridiculous, the kind of laugh that comes from tension breaking. But I found you eventually, Lyra continued, and now you're here. Cade looked around at the impossible palace, at crystalline trees beginning to hum, more complex melody, at advisors watching from shadows with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. So, he said, what happens now? Lyra's smile widened. Now, Cade Brennan, you help me repay a debt. And perhaps if you survive my court's attempts to have you poisoned or thrown off the palace, we finally finish that conversation we started in the fire. The crystalline trees began playing something that sounded suspiciously like jazz. The council chamber materialized around them like thought-given form. One moment, Cade followed Garrett through humming corridors. The next, they stood in a room that shouldn't exist. Walls curved upward into a dome, displaying the galaxy itself, stars wheeling an ancient dance. The floor showed Mars rotating thousands of miles below. It was designed to overwhelm, to remind everyone that they stood in a place of power. 12 figures waited in semicircle around the central dais. Etherian nobles, mostly pointed ears and violet eyes, marking them as native to the Empire. A few humans scattered among them. Queen Lyra stood at center, still in formal regalia, but different. In the throne room earlier, she'd been warm, almost playful. Here she was, authority personified. Every inch the monarch who'd united 3-star systems and survived multiple assassination attempts. Counselors, she said, her voice carrying without effort. Allow me to introduce Cade Brennan, former Sergeant Earth Medical Corps. He served with distinction at Obsidian Front 12 years ago, where he saved my life during the transport crash. Surprise rippled through the advisors. Several exchanged glances, recalculating assumptions. Of this moment, Cade Brennan joins my personal advisory staff with immediate effect. He will have full access to palace security systems and military intelligence. He reports directly to me. The silence could have been weaponized. An older Etherian stepped forward, silver threaded through his dark hair, military decorations suggesting long career in positions of authority. His eyes were cold, assessing. Your Majesty, he said, making it clear he thought this beneath her dignity. With respect, perhaps you should explain why you're appointing an unvetted human to such sensitive position. Lord Varric Ashford, Lyra said, and something in her tone made everyone straighten. Didn't you appoint your nephew to Defense Council last year? After 6 months' service. Varric looked embarrassed. That was different, Your Majesty. He was family. And Cade Brennan kept me alive when I was bleeding out in a war zone. I'd argue that creates a certain bond. Another figure spoke. Female Etherian with bearing of someone who'd spent decades navigating diplomatic minefields. Counselor Alara Wynn, head of diplomatic relations, suspicious by profession. The question isn't loyalty, Your Majesty, it's qualification. Mr. Brennan was a field medic. What makes him suited to advise on palace security? Cade opened his mouth, then closed it. This was Lyra defending her choice, her authority. His job was to not make it worse. But old habits died hard. With respect, Counselor, he said, keeping the voice level, I spent 6 years pulling people out of combat situations. You learn to read threats quickly under fire. You learn who to trust and who's going to get you killed. And you learn that people who sound most confident are often making worse decisions. He looked at Varric. Your Majesty asked what makes me qualified. I kept her alive when trained soldiers couldn't. I made decisions under pressure when the alternative was letting someone die. If that's not qualification enough, I'm happy to return to fixing agricultural androids. Profound silence. Even crystalline trees outside seemed to stop humming. Then Lyra laughed, genuine delight breaking through formal atmosphere. I like him. We're keeping him. Varric's expression suggested he'd swallowed something unpleasant. The younger man beside him, wearing similar decorations but uncomfortable set to shoulders, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Commander Theron Ashford, Varric's son. Your Majesty, Varric tried again. The decision is made, Lord Ashford. Cade Brennan is now part of my advisory staff. If anyone has concerns about my judgment, submit them in writing. I'll give them the consideration they deserve. Diplomatic speak, for I'll ignore them completely. The meeting concluded with minimal protest. Advisors filed out shooting, Cade looks ranging from curious to calculating. Varric left last hand tightening on ceremonial staff. A small tell. The kind you notice when you'd spent years reading people under stress. This man was dangerous, not because of obvious hostility, but because of control. Theron paused at the doorway, glanced back at Cade, seemed about to say something, then shook his head and followed his father. When they were alone, Lyra's formal composure cracked slightly. She sat on the dais edge, suddenly looking less like queen and more like woman who'd just fought political battle. That could have gone worse, she said. Could it have? Varric could have challenged my authority directly, called for council vote, started building coalition. She looked up. He's been trying to marry me off to Theron for 3 years. Thinks marriage alliance would stabilize succession. Having you here threatens that. I'm just an advisor. You're a human I trust who isn't beholden to court factions. That makes you dangerous. She stood. Come, I'll show you your quarters. Then we need to talk about why I really brought you here. His quarters were more palace than room. Garrett led them through corridors that shifted when Cade wasn't looking, past gardens to find botany, through archways, remembering different purposes. They arrived at a suite that could have housed Cade's entire workshop 3 times over. Walls displaying whatever view you wanted, currently showing Earth, furniture adjusting to presence, a sleeping platform that looked like crystallized moonlight, bathroom with more controls than the transport ship. I'll leave you to settle, Garrett said. Her Majesty will send for you when ready. Try not to let the room rearrange itself while you sleep. It gets confused sometimes. After Garrett left, Cade stood in center of his new quarters and tried to process. Yesterday, fixing mooing android in Nevada. Now in orbital palace, appointed as personal advisor to Queen, he'd saved from death 12 years ago. The smart thing would be refuse. Thank Lyra politely, take portion of credits, return to Terra Nova. To simplicity, to safety. But he'd made a promise 12 years ago. And promises didn't come with expiration dates. He unpacked his duffel bag, 2 shirts, 1 pair of pants without grease stains, his old medical kit from military days, a few personal items carrying memories. Looking at meager possessions spread across furniture that probably cost more than Terra Nova's entire infrastructure, Cade felt the gulf between who he'd been and where he was now. A soft chime announced visitor. The door irised open. Lyra entered alone, having changed from formal regalia into something simpler. She looked younger without ceremonial trappings. Settling in, she asked, trying to figure out shower controls. I think one might be for interdimensional travel. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Can we talk? Really talk, not as queen and advisor, but as 2 people who've been through something and need to figure out what happens next. Cade gestured to seating area. They sat. For a moment, neither spoke. The room hummed the palace's ever-present background noise like breathing. Why am I really here? Cade asked finally. Lyra pulled up holographic display from the table. Images flickered to life. Incident reports, security analyses, medical records. 3 assassination attempts in the past 2 years. First was poison in my drink during state dinner. Would have killed me if I hadn't noticed discoloration. Second was sabotage transport. Crashed in palace hangar. Pilot died. I survived because I decided to walk instead. Third was direct assault during ceremony. 3 attackers with military-grade equipment. We captured one alive. She changed display, showed interrogation recording. The captured assassin was a Therian middle-aged with bearing of someone who'd seen combat. Under questioning, he'd revealed little. Hired through intermediaries, paid well, given one objective, kill the queen. But here's what's interesting, Lyra said, freezing recording on particular frame. Look at his unit tattoo. Cade leaned closer. The marking on the assassin's forearm was faded but distinctive. Icon he recognized from briefings 12 years ago. That's from Obsidian Front, he said slowly, specifically from units operating in sector where my transport crashed. Lyra pulled up more data. I've been investigating, quietly, without Council's knowledge because I don't know who to trust. There were 47 survivors from that specific incident, the crash and bombardment. You were one of them. She changed display again, showed list of names, 47 entries, 45 had been crossed out, marked deceased. They're dying, all of them, over past 5 years. Accidents, natural causes, suicides. Nothing raising immediate suspicion. But when you look at the pattern, someone's eliminating witnesses, Cade finished. To what, I don't know. But whatever happened at Obsidian Front, someone wants everyone who was there dead. She met his eyes. Only 2 people on this list are still alive. Me and Captain Rice Vallon. Cade's breath caught. The pilot who brought me here, the same. She flew rescue missions at Obsidian Front, was one of the people who evacuated me. I trust her completely. She's been helping me investigate. Lyra stood pace to viewport showing Earth. Someone in my court is involved. Has to be. The assassins had access to secure areas. The poison came from restricted medical supplies. Intelligence required to plan these attacks could only come from someone with high-level clearance. You think it's Varric. I think it's someone. Varric is most obvious candidate. Head of military operations, access to everything, clear motive if he wants to install Theron on throne. But I can't prove it, can't move against him without evidence that will hold up to council scrutiny. She turned back. That's why I needed you, not just because you saved my life, but because you're outside court's influence. You have no agenda, no political debts or family loyalties compromising judgment. You can investigate without triggering same alarms. Cade processed this. You brought me here as bait. I brought you here because I need someone I can trust, absolutely. Someone who sees problems and solves them without worrying about court politics. Her expression softened. And yes, because whoever's behind this might make a move when they see you, a new unknown factor in their plans. It might force them to reveal themselves. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Can it be both? She echoed earlier words, but now they carried weight. Real fear beneath humor. Cade stood, moved to join her at viewport. Below them, Earth rotated. Continents he'd walked on, oceans he'd crossed, a world that suddenly felt very far away. All right, he said. Where do we start? They started with the captured assassin's background. Next morning, Cade found himself in secure intelligence room with Lyra and Rice. The space was smaller than council chamber, more functional. Walls covered in holographic displays showing data streams, communication intercepts, financial records. Rice looked different outside pilot's seat, more alert, more dangerous. She'd been military before becoming pilot. Special operations, probably. Cade Brennan, Rice said, studying him with professional assessment. I remember you from Obsidian Front. You pulled Jensen from that burning APC before it exploded. She's still alive because of you. Jensen made it. Married, 3 kids, living on Europa Station. Rice's expression hardened. She's number 38 on the list. Someone tried to make her transport accident look random 6 months ago. I got there first, got her off station before they could try again. She's hidden now, safe, but scared. Where is she? Can't tell you, need to know only. The fewer people who know locations, the safer the survivors. Rice pulled up holographic display. Someone is systematically eliminating everyone who witnessed what happened at Obsidian Front. And I think I know why. She changed display, showed communication intercepts from that battle 12 years ago, encrypted transmissions between separatist forces and unknown contact on Allied side. Someone was feeding separatist intelligence, troop movements, transport schedules. That's how they knew exactly when and where to hit Lieutenant Solvain's transport. It wasn't random. It was targeted assassination. Cade felt ice settle in stomach. Someone inside Alliance wanted Lyra dead. Well, someone wanted entire royal family's line of succession eliminated, Lyra corrected. The plague came 3 weeks after Obsidian Front, killed 46 members of my family. At the time, everyone assumed natural outbreak, tragedy amplified by war conditions. She pulled up medical records, data streams showing genetic analysis, pathogen structure, transmission patterns. But I've been investigating, quietly. The plague wasn't natural, it was engineered, a bioweapon designed specifically to target Etherion royal DNA. Someone created it, someone deployed it, someone with access to our most classified genetic databases. Cade studied data with Medic's trained eye. The pathogen structure was elegant in its lethality. Too elegant. Nature didn't design this precisely. We need to protect Rice, Cade said immediately. If she's on the list too, already done, Lyra replied. Rice knows. She's been operating under rotating security protocols for 2 years. Sleeps in different quarters each night, varies flight routes. She survived Obsidian Front by being careful. She'll survive this the same way. And if Varric sends someone after her, then they'll learn why she's still alive after 12 years of trying, Royce said with dangerous smile. Who has access to that genetic information? Cade asked, refocusing. Military research oversight, diplomatic corps with security clearances, palace medical staff at highest levels. Lyra's voice was tight. The list is short, and everyone on it is someone I'm supposed to trust. A soft alert chimed. Rice checked display, her expression going cold. We have a problem. Palace medical director just turned up dead in his office. Security's calling it suicide. They reached the medical director's office within minutes. Palace security had already cordoned off area. Investigators cataloging evidence. Medical personnel waiting to process body. The medical director, Dr. Castor Wynn, sat slumped at his desk. Single injection mark on left arm. Empty syringe on floor beside chair. All hallmarks of suicide by pharmaceutical overdose. Except, Cade studied scene with 12 years of combat medic experience informing assessment. Something was wrong, several somethings. This wasn't suicide, he said quietly to Lyra. How do you know? Injection site is wrong. Right-handed person committing suicide would inject left arm, yes. But angle's off. Someone else administered this. See bruising around entry point. That's from restraint. Someone held his arm steady. He pointed to other details. Position of body, lack of hesitation marks. Way syringe had fallen. He was murdered, made to look like suicide. But whoever did it wasn't trained in forensic medicine. They made mistakes. Lyra called over head of palace security, Commander Taryn Locke, human 40-something, with suspicious eyes of someone who'd seen too many threats become real. Cade explained observations. Taryn listened, reassessed, seeing his expression darkening. Your Majesty, if this was murder, then someone in palace has access and skill to kill high-ranking official and make it look natural. That's significant security breach. Or inside job, Rice added. How many people could access this office without raising alarms? 23 individuals with appropriate clearance, council members, senior medical staff, and anyone accompanying them with temporary authorization. Lyra's jaw tightened. Seal the office. Full forensic analysis. I want to know everything about what happened here. And Commander Locke, this investigation stays contained. Only people in this room know it's murder, not suicide. Let's see who reacts to that information. They left the office, but implications followed them. Someone had killed the medical director. Someone who knew he had information about plague's origins. Someone tying up loose ends. The trap was closing. It was a bum. The question was, who would spring it first? That night, Lyra couldn't sleep. She stood in Palace Observatory at 3 a.m, watching stars wheel overhead, trying to quiet her mind. Crystalline trees outside played discordant melody, responding to her distress. Their music painting air with anxiety made audible. Footsteps behind her. Soft, careful, announcing presence without demanding attention. Trees are playing jazz, Cade said. Garrett mentioned that means you're distressed. Lyra didn't turn around. I have nightmares. The transport crash. Sometimes I can still feel the fire. Smell burning fuel. Hear screaming. That's normal. Combat trauma doesn't just disappear because time passes. I'm supposed to be strong. Queens don't show weakness. Queens are people. You're allowed to be affected by things that would break most people. He moved to stand beside her at viewport, not touching, but present, grounding. You want to know the truth, Lara said quietly. When I became queen, everyone started treating me like symbol instead of person. Every conversation became calculated. Every smile had agenda. Every kind word came with expectations. I've had thousands of people bow to me, but I've never forgotten the person who saw me as worth saving when I was just scared the lieutenant covered in blood. You saved yourself. I just kept you company. You taught me something that day. You said fear is just information. It tells you what matters. I've been ruling based on that principle for 12 years. Fear tells me what threatens my people, what needs protecting, what's worth fighting for. And right now, I'm terrified. Someone in my inner circle wants me dead. They've killed 45 people to hide conspiracy, and I don't know who to trust except 3 people. Cade was quiet for a moment. Then, tell me about the nightmares, the specific ones. Sometimes talking through them helps. So she did. Told him about waking up convinced she was still pinned in wreckage, about phantom pain from wounds long healed, about guilt of surviving when so many didn't. I became queen because 46 people died, because plague that shouldn't exist killed my entire family. And now I learn it was murder, deliberate, calculated murder. How do I carry that? One day at a time, one decision at a time, same way you survive battlefield. You focus on what's in front of you, solve immediate problem. Then next one, eventually you've made it through. He taught her breathing technique, simple, practical, the kind field medics use to stay calm under fire. Fear is just information. It's telling you this matters, that you need to be smart, not reckless. Listen to it, use it, but don't let it control you. They stood together in observatory watching stars that had witnessed civilizations rise and fall, while crystalline trees slowly shifted from discord jazz to something more harmonious. Thank you, Lara said finally, for keeping your promise. 12 years later, you're still making sure I'm not alone. Some promises don't expire. Below them, through transparent floor, Mars rotated in dark, and somewhere in Palace, someone was planning their next move. The following day brought new complications. Young guard requested audience with Lyra. Corporal Jax Merrick, 22 years old, barely old enough to have finished military training. He had eager energy of someone wanting to prove himself and awareness to know he wasn't there yet. Your Majesty, he said, standing at rigid attention, I wanted to report security concern. I've been monitoring communications as part of duties. Last night I intercepted encrypted message leaving Palace. Couldn't decode it, but routing was suspicious. Went through multiple relays before reaching destination. The kind of setup you use when you don't want anyone tracking where it really goes. Which terminal sent it? Lyra asked. Jax hesitated. That's concerning, Your Majesty. The transmission originated from Lord Ashford's private quarters. Cade watched Lyra's expression carefully. Saw a flash of anger quickly controlled. Calculation behind her eyes as she processed this. Did anyone else see this? No, Your Majesty. I brought it directly to you. Good. Keep it that way. You're dismissed, Corporal. After Jax left, Lyra turned to Cade. We need to move carefully. If Varric knows we're investigating him, he'll cover tracks, destroy evidence, maybe accelerate whatever he's planning. Or we could use this, Cade suggested. Let him think we don't suspect him. See what mistakes he makes. Dangerous game. You said you needed someone who could investigate without triggering alarms. I'm new factor he can't predict. Let me get close to him, draw him out. Lyra studied him with those violet eyes that seemed to see through pretense straight into truth. That puts you at risk. I've been at risk since I accepted your summons. Might as well make it productive risk. She smiled, but it was expression of queen who just made tactical decision. All right, but carefully, Varric's invitation to dinner tonight. He'll offer some pretext about extending olive branch, trying to smooth over council meeting. You'll go. Be diplomatic. Let him think he's recruiting you. And if he tries something, then we'll know for certain. and I'll have cause to move against him. The plan was set, simple, dangerous, with too many variables that could go wrong. But Cade had survived 6 years of impossible situations. He could handle one dinner with potentially traitorous noblemen. Probably. Varric's private quarters occupied section of palace designed to impress. High ceilings displaying historical battles in moving mural form. Furniture ancient and priceless. Art that probably cost more than entire colonies. The dinner table could seat 20, but only 2 places were set. Varric at head, Cade to his right. Message was clear. This was meant to be intimate, confidential. Dr. Brennan, Varric said, gesturing to seat. Thank you for accepting my invitation. I felt we started off poorly at council meeting. I'd like to remedy that. I appreciate the opportunity, Lord Ashford. The meal was elaborate. Course after course of dishes Cade didn't recognize flavors, suggesting Etherian cuisine with human influences. Varric played gracious host, making small talk about palace life, asking about Cade's military experiences, demonstrating charm from decades of political navigation. By third course, real conversation started. The Queen trusts you, Varric said, swirling wine in glass. That's unusual. She's cautious by nature, has to be given assassination attempts. But she's placed remarkable faith in someone she hasn't seen in 12 years. I kept her alive when she was dying. That creates certain bond. Indeed, I respect that. But Dr. Brennan, may I be frank? Please. The Queen is young, brilliant, capable, but young. She became monarch through tragedy, not preparation. She carries weight of empire while still learning to rule it. And sometimes her judgment is compromised by emotion rather than strategy. Cade kept expression neutral. But do you mean she's pursuing investigations into matters best left to security professionals? Seeing conspiracies where there might be simple coincidence. The stress of leadership can do that. Make threats seem larger than they are. You're saying assassination attempts aren't real. I'm saying they may not be part of grand conspiracy. 3 separate incidents over 2 years could simply be isolated threats from separatist sympathizers. But Queen sees patterns, connections. She's convinced there's larger plot when evidence doesn't support it. Varric leaned forward. I'm worried about her. And I'm wondering if someone with your background, someone she trusts, might help provide perspective. Help her see that chasing shadows is distracting her from real governance. There it was, recruitment pitch wrapped in concern. Varric wanted Cade to be his eyes and ears, to report on Lyra's investigations, to undermine her from inside inner circle. That's interesting suggestion, Cade said carefully. I'm not asking for betrayal, just balance. Help her see that not every threat is existential, that sometimes simplest explanation is correct. Varric raised glass, to perspective, and to helping our Queen rule wisely. Cade raised his own glass, to wisdom. They drank. The wine was excellent, rich, complex with flavors evolving on tongue. Cade took another sip, appreciating craftsmanship. Then he felt it, subtle at first, warmth spreading from stomach, not unpleasant but wrong. His medical training recognized sensation immediately. Vasodilation, increased heart rate, early stages of systemic poisoning. He set down glass carefully. Met Varric's eyes across the table. How long, Cade asked. I'm sorry, how long before poison takes full effect? Varric's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Recognition that game had shifted. I have no idea what you're talking about. Perhaps you're feeling effects of wine. It's quite potent. It's poisoned. Same compound as assassination attempt on Queen 2 years ago. I recognize symptoms. Cade stood, steadying himself against table. Room was starting to spin. Interesting choice. Trying to kill me or just send message? Dr. Brennan, you're clearly confused. Perhaps you should sit. I'm going to walk out of here now, and then I'm going to report this to Queen, and then you're going to have to explain why your dinner guest developed acute poisoning symptoms in your private quarters. He made it to door, barely. Corridor outside swam in vision. His legs felt like water. Somewhere behind him, he heard Varric calling for help, perfectly performing, concerned host finding guest mysteriously ill. Cade collapsed. Last thing he saw before consciousness fled was crystalline trees through viewport playing discord jazz loud enough to wake dead. Fever dreams. Cade floated in space between awareness and oblivion. his mind constructing realities from memory and hallucination. He was back at Obsidian Front, not in transport wreckage but before, during initial deployment, standing in command tent reviewing medical supply manifests. Two men arguing outside tent, voices raised enough to carry but not enough to be understood. He glanced up, seeing Colonel Draven, his commanding officer, speaking with someone in an Etherean military uniform. Young ambitious with silver threading through dark hair. In fever dream details sharpened. The Etherean officer's face became clear. It was Varric, younger by 12 years but unmistakably Varric. Dream memory continued. Draven handed something to Varric. Data chip. Coordinates Cade's fever-addled mind supplied. Transport schedules. Intelligence that shouldn't have been shared. Draven's voice drifted into tent. The princess bloodline ends tonight. Then your people will need new leadership. Leadership that understands value of proper alliances. Varric's response, Council won't accept human-backed coup. They will when they have no alternative. 46 targets. Plague vector is prepared. 3 weeks after Princess dies at Obsidian Front, your competition disappears. Clean, efficient, and you emerge as only viable candidate for Regent. Dream shifted, became fire and screaming, transport crash, Lieutenant Solvane bleeding out beneath debris. Cade pulling her free while somewhere in dark Draven and Varric watched carefully planned assassination fail because one stubborn medic refused to leave dying soldier behind. 12 years of hunting survivors. 12 years of eliminating witnesses to conspiracy that should have succeeded. Fever dream dissolved into darkness. When Cade woke, he was in medical bay. Lyra sat beside his bed, her hand gripping his like she'd done 12 years ago, when positions were reversed. Her eyes were red-rimmed. She looked like she hadn't slept. You're awake, she said, voice hoarse with relief. Thank gods. You've been unconscious for 48 hours. Poison. We almost lost you. Varric, Cade managed, throat raw. I know. Rice found you collapsed in corridor. We traced compound. Same as my assassination attempt. Varric claims innocence. Says you fell ill at dinner, suggests food allergy or reaction to wine. Has witnesses prepared to testify you seemed disoriented even before meal. I saw something in fever dreams. Memory from Obsidian Front. Cade pulled himself up, ignoring protesting body. Varric was there, talking to Colonel Draven. They planned it, ambush on your transport. Plague. All of it. He told her everything he'd remembered. Conversation, data chip, conspiracy laid bare in fragment and fever vision. Lyra listened, expression hardening with each detail. That's not evidence we can use. Fever dreams aren't admissible in court. Varric will claim you're confused that poison affected memory. Then we need real evidence. Medical bay door opened. Commander Theron Ashford entered, looking like he'd aged decade in 2 days. He held data chip. Your Majesty, he said, I need to speak with you about my father. Lyra gestured him forward. I've known for months that something was wrong. Financial records that didn't add up. Encrypted communications. I thought maybe he was just planning political moves. But then Dr. Brennan collapsed and I couldn't ignore it anymore. He held up data chip. This contains everything. Father's communications with separatist groups. Financial transactions, funding assassins. Medical records showing he was vaccinated against plague 2 weeks before outbreak. Research files on bioweapon development. And communications with someone called the Colonel discussing elimination of Obsidian Front survivors. His voice broke. My father orchestrated plague that killed my mother. His own wife. Because formula mutated. It was supposed to only target direct royal bloodline, but it spread to extended family. She died because of his ambition. And he's been covering it up ever since. Lyra took data chip with shaking hands. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm soldier before I'm son. Because something matter more than family loyalty. Because what he's done is monstrous. Theron met her eyes. And because if I don't help stop him now, more people will die. An alert chimed. Rice burst into medical bay. Your Majesty, we have problem. Unidentified fleet just appeared at system edge. 20 warships. Separatist design. They're demanding you surrender yourself for war crimes or they'll bombard Palace. Varric's final move, Lyra said. He's forcing confrontation. She stood and despite exhaustion, despite fear, she was every inch queen. How long until they're in firing range? 8 hours, maybe less. Lyra looked at Cade, still weak from poison. At Theron, who just betrayed his father. At Rice, ready for whatever came next. Then we have 8 hours to prepare, because I didn't survive 12 years just to surrender now. If Varric wants war, he's going to get one. Crystalline trees outside began playing battle hymns. The war room materialized around them like purpose given form. Lyra stood at center of holographic display showing Sky-Throne Mars, an approaching separatist fleet. 20 warships arranged in attack formation, moving with deadly precision. Around table her war council assembled. Only people she trusted, absolutely. Cade still weak from poison but refusing to stay in medical. Rice already running combat calculations. Theron carrying weight of his father's betrayal like armor he couldn't remove. Commander Taryn Locke, head of palace security, grim-faced and ready. And Corporal Jax Merrick, young but sharp, included, because Lyra believed in building future while fighting for it. Outside war room, crystalline trees played battle hymns, Palace itself responding to her resolve. Status report, Lyra commanded. Taryn pulled up defensive readouts. Palace shields at full capacity, can withstand orbital bombardment approximately 4 hours. Fighter squadron ready for deployment. 40 ships against their 20, but ours are lighter faster. Palace guards standing by, but we have problem. Varric. Lord Ashford has been rallying support among council. Claims you've become paranoid seeing conspiracies where none exist. Half Palace Guard is wavering. If he calls for your removal, it could split our forces exactly when we need unity. Lyra studied holographic display, mind working through scenarios with tactical precision she'd learned in military before Crown found her. Fleet wasn't just threat, it was pressure tactic. Force her into corner, make her look weak if she evacuated, make her look reckless if she stayed and fought. Varric was counting on her choosing wrong. He wants me to either run or lock myself in Palace while he takes command. Claims he's protecting me while actually staging coup. Classic. So what do we do? Jax asked, then added quickly, Your Majesty. Lyra smiled. Not diplomatic expression she wore in court, but something fiercer. Smile of woman who'd survived transport crash plague and 12 years of assassination attempts. Smile of someone who'd learned that sometimes you had to fight not because you wanted to, but because walking away meant abandoning everything that mattered. We do what they don't expect. We turn their strength into weakness. Use their size against them. Make this about tactics, not firepower. She gestured to Cade. You said yesterday that field medics survive by reading situations quickly, by making smart decisions under pressure. Tell me what you see. Cade studied display medical training, translating to strategic assessment. Fleet is arranged for maximum intimidation. Show of force meant to make you surrender without fighting. But that formation is defensive. They're protecting something in center. Command ship, probably. Draven, Lyra said. The colonel. Still alive after 12 years, still coordinating Varric's conspiracy. He's out there commanding this fleet, thinking he's finally going to finish what he started at Obsidian Front. She pulled up new section of display showing Palace's internal structure. Here's what we're going to do. Rice, you'll lead fighter squadron. Not to engage directly, to harass. Draw them close, make them think they're pursuing scattered resistance. While actually luring them into range, Rice finished seeing strategy take shape. Palace has short-range EMP emitters. Get them close enough we can disable their shields. Exactly. Theron, you'll coordinate with Loyalist guards. We need to secure key sections before Varric makes his move. Don't arrest him yet. We need him to reveal himself publicly with witnesses who can't be dismissed. And when he does, Theron asked, then you show everyone evidence you gave me. Let them see what their Lord Ashford really is. Lyra turned to Taryn. Seal throne room. Make it look like I'm fortifying position. Let Varric think I'm scared, but actually, we're preparing trap. What kind of trap? The kind where we let enemy board exactly where we want them, where we control environment and force them to fight on our terms. She looked around table. Varric wants war. We'll give him one, but not the war he's expecting. Cade recognized strategy, asymmetric warfare. The kind of tactics that won when you were outnumbered and outgunned. Use terrain, control information. Make enemy commit to course of action based on false assumptions, then exploit their mistakes. There's one problem, he said. This plan requires you to be in throne room when they board. That puts you directly in danger. I've been in danger since day I became queen. Difference is now I'm choosing my battlefield. She met his eyes. You taught me something 12 years ago. You stayed in that bombardment because moving me would have killed me. Sometimes dangerous position is strategic position. Sometimes you hold ground not because it's safe, but because it's right. I also promised you wouldn't face darkness alone. You're not leaving me alone. You'll be in backup command center coordinating our forces. That's where I need you. Not dying beside me in some dramatic last stand, but making sure we win this. Her voice softened. Keep your promise by keeping me alive. By being brilliant tactical mind who sees solutions when everyone else sees only problems. Before Cade could respond, alarms shrieked through Palace. Fleet had accelerated. ETA now 6 hours. Stations, Lyra commanded. We end this today. Varric made his move 3 hours before Fleet arrived. He called emergency session of full council invoking ancient protocols requiring Queen's presence. Council chamber filled with advisors, nobles, military commanders, all powerful people who shaped Etherian policy and could make or break monarch's authority. Lyra entered last, wearing full ceremonial armor instead of robes. A statement. Not queen seeking approval, but warrior ready for battle. Varric stood at his position, picture of concerned loyalty. Your Majesty, thank you for coming, despite crisis. We need to discuss your response to approaching fleet. My response is to defend this palace and everyone in it. Was there something unclear about that? Your Majesty defending is one thing. Refusing to evacuate is another. Council believes, Lyra's voice cut through chamber like blade. You speak for them now, Lord Ashford. Murmurs rippled through assembled advisors. Lyra had just challenged Varric's authority in front of everyone who mattered. Varric's expression remained calm, but Cade, watching through concealed camera feed from backup command center, saw tightness around eyes, slight tension in shoulders. This wasn't going according to script. I speak for those who value your safety, Your Majesty. Fleet is overwhelming force. Staying here is suicide. We should evacuate you to secure location while military handles. While you handle it, you mean. Lyra stepped forward. While you take command of palace defenses. While you position yourself as hero who saved throne. While I run and look like coward who abandoned her people. It's exactly what you want. Because if I evacuate, you control narrative. You control palace. And when dust settles, you control whether I come back at all. Chamber went silent. Everyone understanding they were witnessing something unprecedented. Queen openly accusing her military commander of sedition. Varric's mask slipped. Just slightly. Just enough. Your Majesty, these accusations are paranoid. Stress of leadership has clearly, Theron, Lyra said. Show them. Theron stepped forward, holding data chip like it weighed more than armor. His face was pale but determined. This contains evidence of Lord Varric Ashford's treason, communications with separatist forces, financial records funding assassinations, medical documentation proving he orchestrated plague that killed royal family 12 years ago. He inserted chip into chamber's central display. Data flooded holographic projectors, encrypted messages decoded and displayed. Financial transactions traced through layers of obfuscation. Research files on bioweapon development, medical records showing Varric's vaccination before plague's outbreak, and communications with someone identified only as the Colonel, discussing systematic elimination of Obsidian Front survivors. Evidence was damning, comprehensive, undeniable. Varric's expression went cold. That data is fabricated. Lies constructed by people who want to undermine. Your son provided this information, Lyra said quietly. Your own son who couldn't stomach what you'd become, who chose honor over family loyalty. Varric looked at Theron with something that might have been betrayal or rage. You don't know what you've done, what you've destroyed. I know exactly what I've done. I've stopped you from killing more innocent people for power you never deserved. My guards, Lyra commanded, arrest Lord Varric Ashford for high treason. That's when everything broke apart. Half guards moved to comply. half moved to defend Varric. Council chamber erupted in chaos. Shouts, accusations, people choosing sides in conflict that had been building for 12 years. Varric activated something on wrist, a signal, prearranged. Throughout Palace, loyal guards clashed with those who'd been bought or convinced. Corridors became battlefields. Sections sealed themselves as different factions claimed territory. Civil War Varric had been planning erupted with brutal efficiency. So much for peaceful arrest, Rice muttered through Command Center's comm link. He was always going to fight, Lyra said, voice carrying over chaos. But now everyone knows why. Now he can't hide behind legitimacy. Guards with me. We're heading to throne room. Anyone who wants to stop us can try. She led core group of loyalists through corridors that shifted and changed Palace itself, helping or hindering based on its connection to her biorhythms. Behind them, Varric rallied his forces, two groups moving through Sky Throne toward inevitable confrontation. In backup command center, Cade coordinated defensive positions while monitoring approaching fleet. 5 hours until arrival. But battle had already started. Separatist fleet emerged from dark like predators closing on wounded prey. 20 warships each bristling with weapons that could reduce Sky Throne to expanding debris. They moved in formation, disciplined and professional, broadcasting demands for surrender on all channels. In Fighter Bay, Rice Valen stood before her squadron. 40 pilots, human and Etherion, mixed, all volunteers who'd chosen to follow their queen into what looked like certain death. All right, Rice said, voice carrying over Bay's comm system. Here's situation. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and facing professional military forces with ships twice our size. They expect us to either surrender or die quickly. She smiled, not pleasant expression, smile of someone who'd survived Obsidian Front and learned survival meant doing things enemy didn't expect. We're going to do neither. We're going to harass them, sting them, make them so angry they chase us right into Palace's EMP range. Then we're going to board their command ship and capture their leader. Questions? Young pilot raised hand. That's insane. Yes, but Queen's counting on us and I've never let her down. Anyone who wants to leave can do so now, no judgment. This is volunteer only. Nobody moved. Good. Let's go remind these separatist bastards why they lost war first time. Fighter Bay doors opened, 40 ships launched into black, scattering like seeds on solar wind, and space battle began. Rice's squadron didn't engage directly. They harassed, struck from unexpected angles, used Palace's structure for cover drawing, fire away from critical systems, made themselves infuriating targets that demanded response. And slowly, carefully, they lured Separatist fleet closer. Enemy commander aboard central flagship saw scattered resistance, disorganized defense, exactly what you'd expect from Palace and crisis forces split by internal conflict. He ordered ships forward, into engagement range, where they could use superior firepower to maximum effect, exactly what Lyra had planned. Now, Cade transmitted from command center. Palace's hidden EMP emitters activated, focused electromagnetic pulses that wouldn't damage structure, but would fry unshielded electronics within specific radius. Separatist fleet's shields flickered, died, left them vulnerable. Rice's squadron struck. Not frontal assault, surgical strike, targeting engines, weapon systems, communication arrays, disabling rather than destroying. Because dead ships were useless. Captured ships were prizes. Flagship tried to retreat, but its engines were already damaged. Dead in space, vulnerable. Boarding teams, Rice transmitted, "You're up." Inside Sky Throne, Lyra reached throne room with her core group of loyalists. Chamber was vast crystal floors, showing Mars below walls, displaying galaxy itself. She'd prepared this space carefully. Not as fortress, but as trap. Varric arrived moments later with his forces. Two groups faced each other across throne room's expanse. Etherion and human, loyalist and traitor. Final confrontation, 12 years in making. It didn't have to be this way, Varric said. Voice echoed in chamber, amplified by acoustics designed to make every word from throne carry weight. I built this empire's military, protected Etherion through separatist wars. I deserve to rule. You deserve to serve, Lyra replied, like every person who takes oath to protect their people. But service wasn't enough for you. You wanted power. Wanted it so badly you killed 46 members of my family. including your own wife. Plague mutated, that was unforeseen. You created weapon that killed children, Varric. My sisters were children. My cousins. Babies who'd never done anything except be born into wrong bloodline. Her voice hardened. You don't get to call that unforeseen. You get to call it murder. I get to call that necessary. Your family was weak. Led us into war we should have ended years earlier. Cost us thousands of lives because they were too afraid to use weapons we'd developed. Too concerned with ethics and proportional response to do what needed doing. So you decided to do it yourself. Killed everyone who stood between you and power. And when I survived Obsidian Front, when one stubborn medic kept his promise and pulled me from wreckage, you spent 12 years trying to fix your mistake. Lyra stepping forward and crystalline trees outside began playing something that wasn't quite Battle Hymn and wasn't quite Requiem. Something new. Something that matched this moment. I was 18 years old in that transport, Varric. Terrified. Certain I was going to die, and you know what kept me alive? Not my royal blood, not my training. A human sergeant who promised I wouldn't face dark alone. Who saw me as worth saving not because of what I represented, but because every life matters. That's principle you don't understand. Reason you'll never be fit to lead. Principles don't win wars, child. No, but they give you something worth winning for. Alarms shrieked. Section of throne room's outer wall exploded inward. Boarding party breaching from outside. Not separatist. Something else. Through smoke and debris, figure emerged wearing armor that had seen decades of combat. Older. Scarred. Moving with brutal efficiency of someone who'd killed many times and felt nothing about it. Colonel Draven had decided to join party. Princess Lyra, he said, voice carrying a rasp of damaged vocal cords. You should have died at Obsidian Front. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. Behind him, dozen elite soldiers in light-bending armor. Same design used in previous assassination attempts. Professional killers with one target, Queen. Lyra drew her ceremonial blade. It activated with hum light, solidifying into edge that could cut through armor like paper. Around her loyalist guards formed defensive perimeter. You want me dead, Lyra said. Come try, but understand something. I'm not terrified, Lieutenant, anymore. I'm Queen who survived everything you threw at her. And today, your conspiracy ends. Draven smiled. We'll see. Throne room exploded into violence. 3 battlefields, 3 critical moments, all happening simultaneously. In space, Rice's boarding team breached Separatist flagship. Corridor fighting, close quarters, every meter contested. She led from frontways she'd done at Obsidian Front because leaders who asked others to take risks while staying safe weren't leaders worth following. Flagship's commander made his stand at bridge. Professional soldier. Respected. Wrong side of history, but committed to choices. Stand down, Rice commanded. Your shields are gone. Your fleet is disabled. This is over. Orders were to kill Queen or die trying. Then you'll die, but your crew doesn't have to. Let them live. Let them go home to families. Let them be on right side of this story. Commander looked at his bridge crew. Young faces, people following orders because that's what soldiers did. Not zealots, not fanatics, just people doing jobs. He lowered weapon. All ships stand down. Cease fire. Surrender to Etherion forces. One battlefield resolved. In palace corridors, Theron led loyalist guards against Varric's forces, fighting people he'd trained with, friends who'd chosen loyalty to his father over loyalty to crown. It hurt, every engagement, every person he had to fight, but he'd made his choice, had decided that some things mattered more than family, more than friendship, more than comfort, justice, truth, principle that power came with responsibility, and when you betrayed that responsibility, you forfeited right to lead. Section by section, they pushed Varric's forces back, reclaimed palace, secured it, second battlefield resolving. In throne room, Lyra fought Draven. Colonel was older but experienced, brutal, efficient. He fought like warfare itself given form. No wasted movement, no hesitation, just violence perfected through practice. Lyra was younger, faster, but he had reach, had strength, had advantage of lifetime spent killing. She used everything she'd learned. Military training from academy. Combat techniques practiced over 12 years. But most importantly, she used what Cade had taught her in burning transport while world exploded around them. Fear is information. Pain tells you where you're vulnerable. Survival means being smarter than opponent, not stronger. Draven drove her back across crystal floor. His blade scored hits, shallow cuts, drawing blood, making her slower. Around them, guards fought Draven's elite team. Jax Merrick, young and determined, held line against soldiers twice his experience. Terran Locke coordinated defenses, turning throne room's architecture into tactical advantage. But center of it all was Lyra and Draven, queen and assassin. Confrontation 12 years delayed. You were supposed to die, Draven said, pressing attack. One transport crash, one dead princess, would have changed everything. I had help surviving. Lyra deflected strike, countered with precision. Someone who believed I was worth saving. One medic's mistake cost us empire. No, your conspiracy cost you everything. You just haven't realized it yet. She saw opening, not in his defense, in his pattern. Way he favored left side, compensating for old injury, kind of thing medic would notice, kind of thing Cade would spot. She'd asked him during their time together these past days about identifying weaknesses, how field medics assessed casualties under fire. Look for compensation, he'd said. People protect injuries instinctively, makes them predictable. Lyra feinted right. Draven compensated left, exactly as predicted. She pivoted. Her blade found gap in armor, not killing strike, disabling one. Cut through mechanical linkages that powered his enhanced armor. Systems failed. Draven stumbled. Armor became prison rather than advantage. Lyra pressed blade to his throat. Yield, she commanded. Kill me. Make yourself feel better. No, she pulled blade back. You're going to stand trial. Face justice. Spend whatever remains of your life knowing you failed. That your conspiracy collapsed because one person kept promise. That's worse than death for people like you. Around them, Draven's elite team surrendered. Varric's forces throughout Palace stood down. Civil war ended not with dramatic finality, but with simple exhaustion. People lowering weapons, realizing fight was over. Varric himself was detained by Theron's guards. Father and son faced each other across throne room. You destroyed everything, Varric said. No, Theron replied. You did. I just made sure everyone knew. The battle had ended, but one critical injury remained. During the throne room fight, when Lyra had been pressed back against the crystal floor, Draven had seen his opening. The killing blow. Blade descending toward Queen's unprotected back. Jax Merrick had seen it too. No time to think, only react. He threw himself between them. Draven's blade meant for Queen's heart punched through Jax's shoulder instead. Through muscle-bone lung, the kind of wound that killed soldiers slowly, painfully. The blade had missed his heart by 2 centimeters, collapsed, his lung fractured his scapula. Jax collapsed, blood spreading across crystal floor. Cade had reached him within seconds, his medic training overriding everything else. Field equipment, rapid assessment, stabilization protocols that kept Jax alive until they could get him to proper medical bay. Now 3 days later, Jax lay in medical bay bed, bandaged and sedated but alive. The surgery had taken 8 hours. Reconstruction of damaged tissue, repair of collapsed lung. Physical therapy would take months. Lyra visited daily, sat beside his bed the way Cade had sat beside hers 12 years ago. You're going to be fine, she told him. The medics say another week and you'll be awake properly. 6 months of therapy and you'll be back on duty. She paused. You took hit for your queen. Foolish but brave. When you heal, I'm promoting you. Security chief trainee. You'll work with Commander Locke, learn everything about protecting this palace. Because someone who would die for his queen deserves to live or lead for her. 3 weeks after the battle, formal announcements came. Varric and Draven awaited trial in secure detention. Evidence was comprehensive, overwhelming. Their conspiracy revealed in detail that made denial impossible. During Varric's interrogation, he'd confessed to ordering medical director's assassination. His Westerly Wind counselor, Alara Wind's cousin, had discovered plague's true origins and was preparing to go public. Varric's personal guards carried out execution, staging it as suicide. Those guards were now in custody facing trial alongside their master. Counselor Alara Wynne resigned her position voluntarily. Though investigation found no evidence of her involvement in Varick's conspiracy, the fact that her cousin had been murdered to protect the secret made her position untenable. She requested retirement, citing need to mourn family and rebuild trust. Lyra accepted with regret. Separatist fleet's surviving crews were offered amnesty. Most accepted. Professional soldiers were willing to switch sides when presented with evidence they'd been manipulated by corrupt lord rather than fighting for legitimate cause. Council underwent reorganization. Positions opened. New advisors appointed based on merit rather than family connections. Lyra was building government she'd wanted since becoming queen, one that served people rather than power. In quiet moments between restructuring, Cade sent transmission to Terra Nova. The 75,000 credits had already been transferred, earmarked specifically for water purification system, new medical scanner, and climate control upgrades. Mrs. Calloway responded with video message. Behind her, Herbert the android stood silent, fixed, no longer mooing. "You fixed us even from Mars orbit," she said, smiling. "That's some kind of miracle, Dr. Brennan. Come visit when you can. The town wants to thank you proper." Cade smiled, watching message. Terra Nova would be fine, and someday when things settled, he'd return. Keep that promise, too. The formal announcement came in throne room, broadcast across 3 star systems. Queen Lyra Thornhaven stood before assembled advisors, military leaders, diplomatic corps, and civilians. Behind her, holographic displays showed architectural plans, educational curricula, vision for future. "Today," she said, voice carrying through chamber and across Ansible network, "we established Thornhaven Academy, a military institution focused not just on combat proficiency, but on ethical leadership, on protecting those who cannot protect themselves, on understanding that strength without wisdom is tyranny waiting to happen." She gestured to displays. "This academy will train next generation of leaders, not just military commanders, but people who understand responsibility that comes with power, who know that true strength is choosing justice over vengeance, peace over war, building over destroying." Beside her stood Cade Brennan, not in military uniform, but in robes of chief instructor. Dr. Cade Brennan will lead this academy. He brings experience from combat medicine, from making impossible decisions under fire, from understanding that every life matters, that we don't measure success by enemies defeated, but by people saved, by futures protected, by promises kept. Crystalline trees outside played harmonious melody, palace itself approving, celebrating. "We've survived conspiracy and war, survived attempts to destroy not just individuals but principles. Principle that leadership means service. That power comes with obligation. That every person, regardless of birth or species, deserves to be treated as worth saving." She looked out at assembled crowd, at Theron, who'd chosen honor over family, at Rice, who'd led them to victory, at Jax, recovering but present in wheelchair, refusing to miss this moment, at Cade, who'd kept promise, 12 years old, and made it mean something. "12 years ago, I was terrified lieutenant in burning transport. Someone promised I wouldn't die alone. He kept that promise, and in doing so taught me that survival isn't enough. We must live with purpose, build with intention, create future where no one has to face darkness alone." She raised voice. "That's what this academy represents. That's what we're building together. Legacy that outlasts us, future worth the fight, promise that we keep not just to each other, but to everyone who comes after." Room erupted in acknowledgement. Not just applause, true belief. Sense that something fundamental had shifted, that Etherion wasn't just surviving anymore, it was growing, changing, becoming what it should have been all along. That night, Lyra stood in observatory with Cade, watching stars wheel overhead in ancient dance. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for keeping your promise. 12 years later, you're still making sure I'm not alone. Some promises don't expire. Then what do they have? Continuation, evolution. First promise was that you wouldn't die alone. Second promise is that we build something that matters, something that lasts after we're gone." Below them, through transparent floor, construction crews worked on Academy's foundation. Even at night, even after all that had happened, because future didn't wait for convenient timing. Lyra took Cade's hand, not romantic, not yet, maybe not ever, but something deeper. Partnership, understanding, bond between people who'd faced darkness together and chosen to build light. Stay with me, she asked, not as debt or duty, as someone who believes in what we're building, as someone who wants to see this through. I spent 12 years fixing broken things in Nevada. Thought that was enough. Thought I'd found peace, Cade squeezed her hand, but you taught me something. Peace isn't absence of conflict. It's presence of purpose. I want to be part of this, part of building future. Crystalline trees played music that had no name, something between celebration and anticipation. Sound of potential becoming reality. You know what the best part is, Lyra said? First class of cadets. Young people who learn that leadership means service, that power comes with responsibility, that they're part of something larger than themselves. Jax is going to be impossible to deal with once he's healed. He'll want to help with everything. Good. We need impossible people, people who refuse to accept that things can't change, who look at broken systems and say, we can fix this, who keep promises even when it's hard. Below them, transport arrived, carrying supplies for Academy, carrying hope in physical form. Night stretched before them. Construction continued below. Galaxy wheeled overhead. And in heart of Sky Throne, two people who'd been brought together by fire and maintained by promises stood together, building something that would outlast them both. Crystalline trees played on. Music without end, sound of future arriving one moment at a time. Thornhaven Academy's inaugural class assembled in courtyard. 50 cadets, human and Etherion mixed. Young people chosen not for family connections or political influence, but for potential, for spark that said they could be leaders worth following. Jax Merrick, now security chief in training, stood before them in instructor's uniform. The blade wound had healed, though he'd need physical therapy for another year. But he could stand, could fight, could teach. You're here because someone believes you can be better than people who came before. Better doesn't mean perfect. Means committed, means willing to learn, means understanding that power without responsibility is just another word for tyranny. In administration building, Cade prepared lesson plans for field medicine and tactical assessment, teaching next generation not just how to survive, but how to help others survive, how to make impossible choices with wisdom instead of just instinct. Rice led combat flight training, turning eager pilots into skilled defenders who understood that winning meant protecting, not destroying. Theron taught military ethics, using his father's conspiracy as cautionary tale, showing students exactly what happened when ambition overtook duty. And Lyra, when her duties as queen allowed, came to speak with cadets. Not as distant monarch, but as someone who'd been where they were. Young, uncertain, trying to figure out how to be something more than they'd started as. I was 18 when I nearly died. 18 and terrified and certain that I'd never amount to anything. A medic kept me alive, promised I wouldn't die alone. That promise changed everything, not just for me, but for this entire empire. She looked at young faces staring back at her, saw herself 12 years ago, saw potential waiting to be realized. You're going to make promises to yourselves, to each other, to people you haven't met yet. Keep them, not because it's easy, but because keeping promises is what separates leaders from tyrants. People who build from people who destroy. Future from past. Cadets listened, some understanding immediately, some needing time. All of them part of something that hadn't existed before, something built on principle that one person keeping one promise could change history. In diplomatic wing, Counselor Ilara Wynn's replacement received transmission. Unknown origin. Heavily encrypted. When decoded, it showed message from deep space. Queen Lyra Thornhaven, we have observed your choice. Justice over vengeance. Building over destroying. We are the collective. We've been watching humanity's integration with Aetherion Empire. Watching for signs that you're ready. Your response to internal crisis suggests readiness. We wish to make contact, to discuss alliance, to explore what might be built when species work together rather than compete. Attach coordinates, instructions, an invitation. The new diplomatic advisor, carefully vetted and appointed based on merit rather than connections, brought message to Lyra immediately. It's legitimate, best as we can tell. First contact with species we didn't know existed. Lyra studied transmission. Thought about everything that had happened. Conspiracy, battle, reconstruction, academy, all of it leading to this moment. During the investigation into Varric's conspiracy, they discovered something odd. Encrypted signals being received at Palace. Not from Varric, from deep space, unknown origin. They'd been coming for weeks, someone watching them, learning, studying their response to crisis. The collective had been observing all along. Prepare response, Lyra said. Tell them we're interested, but we meet on neutral ground, equal terms. We've had enough of people thinking they know what's best for us without asking. And if they refuse, then we'll know they're not worth allying with. True partnership means mutual respect, not one side dictating terms to other. Response was sent, invitation accepted with modifications, first contact scheduled, new chapter beginning. Lyra stood at her viewport that night, watching stars that suddenly seemed less distant, less empty, full of possibility. Kay joined her. Silent companionship, the kind that didn't need words. You know, she said finally, when you pulled me from that transport 12 years ago, I thought surviving was victory, thought making it through day was enough. And now I know surviving was just beginning. Everything after, choice to build instead of hide, to lead instead of just rule, to keep promises even when they're hard. That's real victory, the one that matters. You've built something incredible here. We've built it. You, me, Reese, Theron, Jax, everyone who chose to be part of this. That's what makes it matter. It's not one person's vision. It's promise we're keeping together. Below them, academy lights glowed in darkness. Above them, stars beckoned with unknowable mysteries. And between two people who had started in fire and ended in purpose, stood together watching future arrive. Crystalline trees played music that sounded like hope given voice, like potential becoming reality, like sound universe makes when something changes for better. And in Heart of Sky Throne Queen and Medic, who'd both learned that keeping promises was most revolutionary act possible, stood together ready for whatever came next. Stars wheeled overhead, galaxy breathed, future waited, and the promise 12 years old and renewed every day continued.